Hello, and welcome back to episode 4 of the Hello Player One podcast, where we discuss the developments in NFT, the metaverse, and the intersection of gaming and marketing. We're your hosts. My name is Jack and Clayton here, and we are the team from Tentango. So today we're going to do something a little different. We are going to talk about what the metaverse could be like. So Clayton, the metaverse, there's a lot of people have talked about what the metaverse will be like. They're defining it in terms of very specific attributes. And the most famous example is Matthew Ball, a VC who wrote a very long and detailed explanation of what the metaverse will be like. He defined it with 7 different attributes. There's it's persistent, it's synchronous and live. Can be a lot of users. It's a fully functioning economy. It's an experience that spans both digital and physical, and so on. So instead of, explaining what the metaverse is using those attributes, I decided to try to explain it using examples of things that we already have currently, and say the metaverse is like this, but something different. And the idea is we don't really know what the metaverse will be like. Like, no one has a clue. We have an idea what it's like. And so I thought it'd be best to just take examples from what we have currently and apply it to what we think it will be like, so that we have a glimpse of that. So yeah. We both looked at it now. So the first is that the metaverse is like Roblox, except for adults. And I chose Roblox instead of, say, Minecraft, because Roblox is just a lot more immersive, where the content is all created by other people. And so that's exactly what we're going to see in the metaverse, is just lots of content, lots of virtual worlds created by you and I. And what's interesting about Roblox is that kids, primarily, they're going there and they're hanging out with their real life friends. We're not talking about they're hanging out with their online friends. We're talking about kids going home, they go on Roblox and they hang out with their real life friends that they just saw in school, for example. And of course, it has its own economy already. In the last episode, we talked about how Roblox creators are already making some of them are making a lot of money. And that's what they're doing as their full-time job. So wanted to get your thoughts on that first, Clayton.
Yeah, I think the reason why, so I agree for the short and medium term that it's for adults. The main thing, I think, why it's for adults right now is because there is, it's heavily weighted towards crypto people in the current Web3 metaverse. And that's because when you think of the metaverse, I think of 20 to about 45 is the range that a lot of people are interested in crypto. When you get much higher than 45, let's say you're a 60-year-old, you're close to retirement, the chances of you being interested in a digital economy is much lower. You didn't grow up in that footprint. But the other end of the spectrum is you have the 9 to 13 teenager range. And that market still hasn't seemed to tap into Sandbox or the current metaverses. I think the reason why they have not tapped into it is because if you're a 20 to 45-year-old, the chances of you having income is much higher than a 9 to 13-year-old. And I think the current layer of friction between a younger person, a teenager, is that they don't have disposable income like a 20-year-old does, or 20-year-old or higher. So I think that once it'll eventually morph into games, and the reason why I think that is because the traditional metaverse, they have the DeFi economy, which is big. You basically need to have money to participate in those economies. And right now, the current metaverses, you kind of have to have money to have participation. the games that are free to play are not as fun as Roblox. So there's still not an appeal to the younger generation to even have fun in the metaverse. So it's either you have money or the fun has to raise for people of the younger generation to come in. I think one of the reasons why we're big on we think the gaming industry is going to onboard a lot of people is because at some point there will be a low free-to-play type game that is fun that these younger generations are going to want to play. And then once it happens, they'll be directly introduced to crypto, or they'll be, how do I say this? They will be using NFTs and on-chain stuff that may not be aware of yet, but they'll soon realize the possibilities with DeFi, GameFi, and they will be able to have their own economies built on top of that. And I think that will be the entry point. So I think it is for the metaverse now, but I think long term you'll see younger generations start on board more in the future, because I think the gaming industry is going to just keep getting better and better and better with the experience component.
Yeah, I didn't really think about the point that you made that right now you need money to participate in the metaverse. Like that's almost exclusively true. You could, we talked about last episode, you could go in Decentraland, but right now all you can do is play poker, which of course requires money.
Yeah. Well, sorry, go on.
Like Sandbox, right? So you can check out Sandbox and you don't need money there, which is cool. Like the alpha season, you could also create stuff in the Sandbox. It doesn't require money. So that's, I think, a major reason why we like the Sandbox as a front runner for one of the virtual worlds that will be around, or one of the metaverses that will be around.
And there are hints of younger people starting to get monetizing their abilities if there's no cost of entry. I see this in the art world where you see teenagers come in they'll mint something on super rare and they're really talented and the right collector will buy them. And then their stuff is going for tens of thousands of dollars and they're like 16 years old. So the entry to...
You're talking about someone other than Ferocious?
Yeah. There's a few out there that are
oh, really?
Yeah, they've made a lot of money. And the reason why they're able to do that is because the cost of entry is just the transaction fee. Like, one's the knowledge is to know what NFTs are, which they're technically savvy for the most part at that age. So it's not as big of a leap as someone in their 60s. And then they just have to pay the transaction fee, which can be, depending on the time of the bull run or bear run, it could be fairly low. And then, so that's basically it. You don't have to buy land. You just basically have to be talented and release your NFT on a platform that, tailors to high-end collectors. Easier said than done, but the entry point is there. And that, I think, is a glimpse of what will be later with gaming when that entry is much lower and the games are more fun. You'll see people coming up with younger generation coming up with different strategies to monetize their content, whether it be minting NFTs, and they'll eventually see, I can earn this kind of yield from DeFi, or I can lend out this asset that I created to someone for money. One of the things I think is going to be really cool. This is almost a side tangent, but think of like if Halo does NFTs, but they don't care about scarcity. They rely on the content creators to create the scarcity of an asset by their following on, let's say, Twitch. So let's say that they play games and they're using this battle rifle that is an NFT. They can reward their followers with that battle rifle, and then from now on, the follower can use that battle rifle in their own games and play. And so people will know that this person was owned by Nadeshot, who uses battle rifle. And I think that's going to be, you'll see it in, I think, the esports world too, is because think of if you could have the first football used in the first Super Bowl. Like that's basically what's going to happen with esports is there'll be nothing like rarity in terms of you can mint as many battle rifles as you want, but there will be only one battle rifle that was in this championship esports game that got the game, like the last kill. Like that will probably go to trade for a lot of money. And those kind of things will introduce a lot of gamification on assets where you don't have to spend a lot of money to buy the asset. You just mint them for free and then just let the content creator bring the value to the asset. I think that'll also be another entry point.
So you said that the content creator mints the item.
Yeah.
Right, because they're minting it, and so it's on chain that shows that they owned it, and so their fans are going to want to own that item because it has their name on it.
Yep.
Do we what's the closest thing that you've seen to what you're describing? Like, I totally understand what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. What's the closest that we have right now to that?
I don't know if we do in terms, because right now it seems like projects are focusing on false scarcity. We want to create the fake value by limiting the scope of it. But I think to onboard people, you want to make the onboarding piece very easy and then let the content creator create the value. And I don't see that happening yet, where they're offloading the value creation to the content creator. It's more like their platform is like Sandbox. They have this. We know that they're doing this gym thing where they're trying to make legendary assets scarce, which I don't necessarily think is a good idea because it's going to be difficult to mint, boss characters or things like that. It's a friction point between the creator and those areas. But if you had a way that the content creator could eventually mint as many as they want and they create their own value that way, I think that is what you'd want to do. And I don't know, to answer your point, I don't know of a game that does it currently right now.
So this is something that I've always thought about, which is, when kids right now, they're in Roblox, they experience the immersive aspect of being in a virtual world with their real friends, right? And typically, I think the age of someone who plays Roblox is probably 6, maybe up to 15, 16, 17, maybe. And then what? What happens after that? Where are they going to go? Which social network are they going to jump in? And I've always thought there's no way they're going to go from 3D to a 2D social network. That seems silly to me. So it's interesting because are they going to go to Fortnite? That's a possibility. That's turning out to be a social network too for people that are a little bit older.
What you've kind of seen this with the Minecraft stuff that you've been involved with. What was so that Minecraft is early on? Where did they typically go? I know a lot of stayed on Minecraft. Where did a lot of people move to after that phase?
Yeah, so Minecraft is unique because you can do other things other than playing the game as it is. And so you get a lot older people playing, and they stay on for a lot longer. We have builders that are, in their 20s, 24, 25, and they're still in the game, but they're not playing the normal game. They're building structures, they're building essentially game maps well into their 20s. Some people, some of the YouTubers that I follow, they're in their 30s.
So do they have any other, is there a more universal thing that they're interested in outside of Minecraft, that they potentially, I know they stay in longer, but is there anything that they potentially migrate to after?
Yeah, it's the Sandbox.
Sandbox.
It was easy once the Sandbox was in the news. Prior to them being in the news, it was a lot harder to onboard Minecraft people to start building in the Sandbox. I did it. It was just maybe 1 out of 5 would do it. Now it's 3, 4 out of 5 would do it.
Got it. And do they like the transition? Have you talking with them where they link the tooling in comparison? And
Yeah, of course, like the tooling is nowhere near where Minecraft is, particularly in the way you can really build out structures quickly. There's also no recording plugin in the sandbox, such as in like Minecraft. And so when you search on YouTube to look for Minecraft videos, you see a lot of these time lapses, and those are created using a specific software, a plugin in Minecraft. They don't have that in the sandbox, and so you don't see many time lapses. So the tooling is not quite there yet, but the creative aspect part, the part that people love in Minecraft, it's there in the sandbox. And what's nice about it is, like, so we have a builder who comes from Minecraft, is very good. He can build stuff very quickly in the sandbox as well. And one of the things that Sandbox does well, I think, is there is the marketplace where you can find all these different assets to use. And that allows people to create structures, maps very, very quickly. Yep. Yeah, so let's jump into the next point, which is the metaverse is like eBay. At least that's kind of like how I thought of it. I thought of it like this because eBay is basically a marketplace, right, for collectibles. The metaverse will be like that too, except the collectibles are NFTs. And I think that pretty much everything in the future that can be an NFT will be an NFT. And so therefore, the metaverse is like a marketplace where anything can be traded digitally. So I'll give you an example. I've heard about very expensive wines, and when people buy very, very, like, we're talking, I don't know, because like I don't drink, like, I don't have very expensive wines, but we're talking probably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for a bottle of wine. What people do is that's like an investment, it's like an investment asset. And so they buy it, right? They have to get it shipped from the first owner. They have to, obviously secure it and insure it. They have to send it to the new owner. The new owner, if he doesn't consume it, will need to then store it, right, in the right temperature so that the investment increases. And so they have to do all this stuff. And then, of course, when it's time to sell, they have to actually move the physical product of the wine to the new location. This is a very obvious use case for NFTs, which is this, like a new bottle of wine. They will have the NFT equivalent. The NFT gets traded. So the physical product doesn't move until someone decides that they're going to burn the NFT because they no longer want to trade it, they want to consume it. So the wine would store in maybe the winery's storage, and then the NFT is sold. First owner can sell the NFT to whoever, right? Only the NFT gets traded. So there's value that's exchanged. And then once the NFT is burned, then the winery will ship out the physical product to the last owner. This way, the product stays in the best environment that it can be. So I think that's a very obvious use case where these NFTs will be traded.
Yeah, I know the watch world has played around with that idea, because if you get a Rolex, Rolex has their own ledger of who bought that watch, and then if you sell it, like, you can, I don't know if you can update it or not. I don't know enough about it, but it's easier to verify who's owned it in the past. One of the things I think when I compare it to eBay, I think the big thing is digital property rights, and I think of solely more in digital scope, where one of the things that in the traditional art world, I use art world as an example because it's the obvious one for me, is like there's a lot of counterfeits. You can go to a gallery and you have to trust that they've they have a reputation. Like say Sotheby's has a reputation, Christie's has a reputation of having authentic pieces. They've done the homework on the provenance of that piece, to know who's owned it, and all that stuff. With digital property rights, first with blockchain, you have that technology to know who's owned the art piece, who minted the art piece. So you have that total history of that art piece. We don't necessarily need Sotheby's, the third party, to validate that. The digital property rights part of it is great for digital creators, is because traditionally, if you're a digital creator, you could make a cool looking art piece, but there was no way to track, like monetize that in a way that proved that the person who bought this print or this version of it bought it from the person who actually created it. So it's difficult for digital creators to monetize their work outside of contracting with Nike or whoever it may be, some company to pay them for their work. This directly allows for artists or content creators to monetize their work directly to the person who wants to buy it, and the person who's buying is getting validated on chain that this person actually created the asset. And all this is done by blockchain and digital property rights. And yeah, I think that is I think at some point you'll see wallet signatures and provenance play a huge role in terms of the value of an asset too. Because one of the things you can look back on Super Rare in the early days, and you'll see like some of the OG collectors, like Whale Shark, Basilius, and then they'll be bidding for like an X copy piece, like $20, $30, and you'll see Coldy, who is an OG artist, bid on that on top of that, and then someone will come with like a big $100 bid. That's history. That's before everything took off, and now X copy is going for hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they're selling for $100. And I think having verifiable truth that this event happened is a really cool thing. And with eBay, when you're buying on eBay, you have to trust the seller is selling an authentic piece, whatever it may be, whether it be a Gucci bag or whatever it is, that you're getting an authentic piece, and you're having to trust that seller. And there's no shortage of Gucci bags. So I had a friend who was visiting New York a few weeks ago, and I had to meet him near Canal Street, and there was no shortage.
Chinatown? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There was no shortage of Gucci bags in Chinatown. So, so that's the main thing, is like you can verify who's owned what, who created the asset, and you can prove that you own it with the digital property rights. So I think that to me is eBay on steroids, and kind of what you see with OpenSea, which will take market share away from, these. I think people will spend more money in areas that they can verify that it is true, where it's tougher in traditional Web 2 world.
What do you think you would spend more money on if something that you buy is is an NFT or has a verified truth?
I think, one is you can verify it's true, but I think the scale of the flex is bigger than the traditional world. So if you have a board, I'll use a CryptoPunk. You have a CryptoPunk that scales more globally than someone who has a wine bottle and a distillery, where no one knows that you have it. And I think a lot of people want to flex what they have. Now, I will say that if you own the NFT, to your point, if you own the NFT to that wine bottle is 200 years old or whatever, people know you had that wine bottle somewhere. So there is that level. But the traditional world, if you have a fancy watch, it's in storage. It's, you're not usually wearing these things on wrist because it's too much of a risk to get it stolen or scratched or whatever it may be. So it's really, you're hoarding these things and no one can enjoy them but yourself. And it's less of a fake, or not less of a fake, but less of a flex, because only you and a small group of people probably know you own that watch. Where if you own a CryptoPunk, everyone knows you own. A lot of people who know CryptoPunks know what seed phrase owns the 7 trait CryptoPunk. That's a pretty big flex.
Would you rather buy a CryptoPunk that looks good, or one that maybe a celebrity owned in the past and you're buying it off of that celebrity, or maybe you're buying it off of someone who bought it off the celebrity? So there's a provenance of the ownership of that from that celebrity.
It would depend on the celebrity. I'm not huge into starstruck people, but the short answer is I would not care about the celebrity, but I would like to buy an art piece that had bidding history of people before this took off. I think that is something I'd actually care about. But to your point, I think if someone, like if, I don't know, Snoop Dogg bought this art piece, but there's no other provenance before him, but he owns it, then yeah, that's going to add, someone's going to want that because Snoop Dogg owned it. I personally don't care, but someone does. And that would add value onto it. And it's not just the value, but when you have someone of high social status buying something, that's also a social signal that validates that you're buying something that this person liked as well. So and I think that's why the 10K profile pictures were so big, is the number of 10,000, it's enough for a lot of people to get involved. And then it's also enough where you can see the social signal happening of like, oh, the floor is rising. And you're able to see the social signal happen in real time. And that's why these floors get crazy, because it's like, oh, the FOMO is happening and you're watching this happen in real time.
Would you buy NFTs from another blockchain, or would you ever move some of your NFTs to another blockchain? For example, you bought art pieces, right, that are on Ethereum, native on Ethereum. Would you ever move them to Solana?
I would not move anything until blockchain is more established on who the winner is going to be. I think Ethereum is probably the safest bet in terms of long-term value. I do have some art pieces on Tezos chain, but I would not tarnish the provenance by transferring it if they have bridges or whatever. I wouldn't tarnish it that way. I would keep it in my current wallet. I don't have a problem buying on Polygon or anything like that. But when I think of high-end artwork, I think of Ethereum first, and then I look around. I know a lot of stuff is being built on Tezos in the art world, and I know a lot of stuff is being built on Algorand, I believe, is also, because I know I don't know him, but I know one of the big collectors in the NFT space. He is a big investor in Algorand, and he's bringing on a lot of top artists to the Algorand chain. So I would be interested in that. But
is there a marketplace for finding Algorand NFTs yet?
I don't know about a marketplace. I don't even know the website, but Pablo Fraile is the guy who is the investor I was talking about. And he's big. He's a really good collector to follow that has his fingerprint or his presence in bringing in traditional artists to on-chain. And I can't remember, he has his own marketplace, but I think of it more as a gallery. I think it's closer to like a digital Sotheby's, where like you can get, Reisinger Andres art pieces, which is he's a architect, and there's a lot of other artists on that platform as well that their stuff goes for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So yeah, but I would consider them is what I'm trying to get. I'd go towards the artist that way.
Okay. So let's move on to the next point, which you kind of alluded to. So I see the metaverse like its own country. To me, it's sort of obvious that it's moving in that direction. So the country, it's not all of it, but these are some of the big things. It has its own reserve currency. So for example, the US dollar, China, it's the Ren, I believe. The country has its own laws. So the metaverse will have its own laws. I think that will be operated by the individual DAOs. And of course, it has its own economy. And we're already seeing that. Clayton, do you think, do you have an idea or position on which currency will be the metaverse currency?
Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea on that. I think that DAOs will play a big role, though. I think, for the metaverse as a country, I think DAOs will be that representation of that. And I think the current form of DAOs, which we've talked about in a previous podcast, is, I don't think the correct way to do this. But DAOs will be able to iterate faster than actual governments, because there's going to be some that don't work at all, where like the current ones that I've seen are you can pretty much buy your vote, which I don't think is an ideal scenario. I think what's probably going to happen at some point is there'll be different weighting mechanisms on voting power. And let's say you own, because there's a security vulnerability that is prevalent as happens in the blockchain world. If you have 51% of the nodes in Bitcoin, you can take over the Bitcoin network, technically. Same would happen if you have all the voting power in the token of the DAO. So, or an NFT, like let's say you own 51% of the NFTs that give you voting power, you can technically overtake the DAO, assuming that the DAO actually lives by the voting power part. I think what's going to happen is there'll be different weights. So let's say you own a large portion of the token of a DAO, you may only get 1% voting power with that token because it doesn't represent the best interests of the DAO. But you might have someone who's clearly creating value for the DAO, and that group or whatever it may be, get 20% of the voting power. So I think there'll be a shifting of a dial of how you can correctly navigate a DAO towards the best interest. And it's not solely driven by monetary gain. But I think we're a long ways away from that. But I think it's the future.
Are you part of any DAOs, or are there ones that you're considering to join?
No, they're all you can buy your vote. I mean, I'm not. There's ones that I do vote in, but it's just because I own the NFTs and I want them to do this. I actually want them to change this thing, but I don't think they'll be successful. I think it's just a starting point. I think it's just a good step forward. But I think most of these will probably fail in terms of DAO forms until they start tinkering around with how they're going to weight the voting component.
Yeah, I just thought of an example, which is, it's like I know someone who owns a lot of NFTs in a particular NFT collection. He has like over 200 something out of a 8,000 item collection. And they can submit proposals. So he was able to submit a proposal. I think anyone can submit a proposal, but he, drove a lot of the votes because he had the most NFTs. And what's interesting is he was the biggest holder of that NFT collection, and if he decides like, hey, I want to do this, it's like you said, it's a social signal to others that because he's the biggest holder, he is going to do something that will increase the value of the NFT collection, and therefore it's very easy to convince others to vote for that proposal.
Yeah, and when you have the voting that heavily weighted to one person or a group of people, it's tough to, one of the things you see with these DAOs is, especially during the bear market, is you see a lot of people in Discord saying how much they don't like a project and those things. You can see that they're clearly tied to the monetary failures and success of a project in a bear market. And what happens with these DAOs that they're heavily correlated to who owns the most tokens. They're going to want short-term returns, and that's my concern. Is even if you aren't, so there's the malicious part of it. Is like, okay, let's buy 51% of the voting power, and just turn this project on its head and that thing. There's that part, and there's also the other part is like no one's malicious. They just have short-term vision of they want profit now, and it's not the ideal scenario to grow a healthy DAO to begin with, because let's say you have 20 people that own 60% of the NFTs, they take a huge hit because it's the bear market. So they're like, okay, let's vote to have the DAO release more tokens to the holders, which benefits no one. It's like, it's not a good idea. So
it's just dilution, basically.
Yeah. So, that's my thinking. But I also think DAOs will potentially have the highest risk for government oversight, because I think that these will eventually, once these get fine-tuned, they will compete against governments. They will, because people will have these voting mechanisms dialed in fairly well in terms of how to make an efficient DAO. They'll first compete against companies. They will replace companies because it's going to be you'll be able to work better in a network of a DAO versus a single company like Facebook. I think you have a chance. The DAOs have a longer chance to live longer as well. But then at some point, I think you'll compete against governments where the ability to raise capital quickly is going to really intimidate a lot of government bodies. You can imagine if there's a person in another country that you want to see elected, they start a DAO, they can raise capital instantly. That's what happened with some of the things with Ukraine. They created an Ethereum wallet. You could send them directly to fund that effort in Ukraine. Think of that whenever people, let's say 60% of the world population is on crypto, how quickly you can move capital to one cause. And I think that is going to intimidate a lot of people. So I can see government oversight being a big thing.
It would be good and bad causes. So
you could fund the Taliban if you wanted to. Like you can, which is scary.
Yeah, exactly. So they're going to have oversight, because what if North Korea sets up a DAO, right? And then people start funding to it. US is for sure they're gonna like blacklist those addresses for sure.
Yep. And even internally in the US, let's say you're a candidate that you want to run for president or something like some elected official, you would get resources from other countries coming. What if Russia wants to fund a candidate in the US to be president? So the candidate is raising funds from external other countries that want to potentially benefit them. So there's those kind of things. So governments could so they'll probably outlaw the ability to raise funds through a DAO. I don't think you'll be able to raise funds through your own social token. Can you imagine having Trump token or something, and then someone comes in and Russia's buying all. Yeah, so there's things like that they'll have to regulate, and DAOs will be at the forefront on how do you not stop innovation of a DAO, but how do you prevent, those kind of things. And again, it comes back to, do you want to have the sole power of a DAO to be the buying your voting power? Where I think you have to tinker with other mechanisms to be successful in long term.
Cool. Okay, so next, I thought that the metaverse is like having a Netflix account. So let me explain. So Netflix, you go into your Netflix account, there's hundreds of shows, right? They're all different experiences. So that's where I make the connection. These are shows that you watch, you're a spectator, but they're experiences that you're a spectator. So you watch it unfold. That's not any different than in the future where I see like someone logs into the metaverse and they can have a selection of experiences to go into. These experiences could be, for example, you log into the metaverse and you go into a sandbox experience. You log out, you then go into the decentralized experience. You log out, maybe you use the same login to go to like a Roblox experience, if they're going to be on the blockchain. And so, except in this way, except here, you actually get to participate in the experience. You're part of the story in the sandbox. So pretty much at this point, a lot of brands are using the sandbox to tell a story, right? They're essentially creating a show experience in the sandbox. And so as a player, you can go in and experience that story, whatever that they want to tell. So you're participating in it. It's not really that different from if, for example, a brand wanted to create a show on Netflix. So like, what is the login? I think it's going to be either ENS or unstoppable domains. If all these experiences are virtual worlds, if they're all built on the blockchain, then one login, you can go into all of these.
Do you think there will be a lower friction? One thing I want to see is, like, we talked about this a little bit on the sandbox and them having teleportation. But one of the things you said, like you would log into Sandbox and log out, go to Roblox. I want to see seamless integration, because right now, if you want to search for a website, like you can go to a website very seamlessly. I think one of the things that with the metaverse being subscription based, or the Netflix and this, there has to be like a seamless way to transition from one app to another. And I don't know what that's going to look like. Do you have any guesses on what you would think that would look like?
Yeah, like I think I sort of alluded to this last episode, where if ENS, right, like we'll say it's basically ENS or Unstoppable, right? So let's say one of them, if they become the default Web3 identity, then that means your wallet is like the account. And so your wallet will be almost like your home base on what you can access in a way. So yeah, so maybe I'm thinking, this is just like something I'm just thinking right now, which is, let's say you have a gaming login, like a gaming identity, because I don't think someone wants to tie their gaming identity with their DeFi identity, with their real life identity. I just don't think that would be good. So let's say you have a gaming identity. So you have a gaming wallet, and let's say that gaming wallet has NFTs for Sandbox, Decentraland, and other metaverses. Maybe these NFTs store your experience, your actual stats for these metaverses. And so based on those NFTs, when you log in, you get to maybe like a specific point in your game experience that you're playing. So something like that, I could kind of think that would be pretty cool. And so someone is just using their game identity to go around and accessing these different metaverses. Someone is going to use a separate DeFi identity to go around and doing their DeFi stuff.
I can see that. One of the things I think would be cool is like there's going to be some like network that you can just think of, like Google or let's say you have Xbox and you have your favorite games listed on top. I want to see like a 3D representation of that. And how would that look is like I think of like you log into this one hub portal, and then you'd have a 3D representation of, I want to go to Sandbox, or I want to go to, and you'd walk your avatar to Sandbox, and you'd click on that, and then App Store would come up, and you would see that, and then you'd come back out, or you'd want to go to Roblox, you'd walk your avatar. So I'm hoping, I would curious to see if that is going to be replaced, like, that's going to be Web3 search engines component. Like maybe you have...
Yeah, so you're basically is saying we want a Web3 Yahoo in the early days.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I think would be kind of cool.
I can see that happening. Yeah.
Because you'd have your favorites, you could start, and you could have the search part component where it's like, I'm looking for this kind of experience. And then you'd have, you put a type in whatever, you probably talk into it, and the Google backend or something like that would, whatever the search engine is capable of doing, it would find those experiences that relate to that and curate it to your experience.
I can see this happening because these games or experiences are built on the blockchain. All the data is there, right? So I can see almost like a Web3 gaming dashboard. This is kind of crazy. So I'm thinking of this right now. I'm just brainstorming this. You go in, it's like Yahoo in the early days where you see all the things that are happening, but it's specific to you because it's all the games or experiences that you're in, right? Because you're just using the same login and they're using the same login. So all the stats, right? They're all NFTs. They're all in your wallet. So it's just easily represented on a dashboard. Again, because it's all tied to one login, because all these games are on the blockchain and so they can integrate with the login. You can't do that now because these games, their stats are all walled gardens, so they're never going to share data. So I can see this happening where it's like someone's personal gaming dashboard. They go in and they see, okay, Sandbox is running some type of event, and like, I don't know, Paris Hilton is, has her own game. She's doing an event, and if you play it, you get some type of NFT, so it's like a limited time. And then you can see a Decentraland, they're running an event maybe like 2 weeks out. And so now you can see a gaming calendar for what you want to do.
Yeah. And you can also imagine these kind of this 3D environment where you could link a bridge to your friends, or you could social, like it's like a graph. I think of it as like a graph thing where here's your cluster of nodes that you're interested in, and you have a bridge that you can physically walk your avatar to your friends' cluster, see what they're doing. And I think that would be a cool experience. And I think that potentially replace this is probably a long ways away, but it would replace like the Google search engine and be a 3D representation of that to some degree. And that you would, because how Facebook works is you've got social graphs on friends and networks, and you have nodes, stronger connection to this friend group than another one. So I think that there will be a 3D representation of that, or I could see it being a 3D representation of that type of graph in the metaverse.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the next point here is the metaverse is like a world where everyone is an inventor. And I use the word inventor here because, again, like they earn royalties from people that license their inventions. So NFTs are just like that, except there's no lawyers or paperwork. People, once they create the NFT, they just earn royalties on it for life, just by default, like almost without doing any extra tech work involved. So yeah, I just see a world where everyone eventually will create their own NFT because it's just their own creative work and they just turn it into an NFT. So like you said, kids or young people creating artwork and turning it into NFTs. Now we're seeing teachers. Like we don't think of the teachers as creative, really creative creators, but now they are because teachers now can create their own courses. Those are turning into NFTs.
The Tiny Tap.
Yeah, Tiny Tap. Yeah. And I had heard about the concept of teachers. Well, there's another concept I heard of in the Web 2 world, which is teachers pay teachers. I think that's a website where teachers who create their own materials to teach classes, right? That like those materials, they could be reused by other teachers if it's like teaching math, that kind of stuff. And so this website I heard is other teachers can buy the material from the one who created it. So of course, like that's the Web 2 space. So it gets a little tricky because when someone buys it, like they could, they can just republish it as their own. Of course, like that's really frowned upon, right? But really, what's stopping someone from doing that? But if there were NFTs, it's a lot harder to do. So
yeah, one of the reasons it makes it harder is because it'll be on chain. So if someone tries to copy something, there is a way that you can show that you did this first, and that can protect you to some degree, which is good.
Yeah, that will probably come. That'll probably be an algorithm and a DAO just to make sure these conflicts don't happen. But yeah, like, whoever thought teachers would be inventors, right? Because in this sense, they are, because they created an invention. Well, they created something, an NFT, and they're earning royalties from it for life. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really powerful too, because you're able to tap into, again, a global market. Right, you can tap into a global market now with Web 2. It's tough to monetize your content without someone potentially copying you, or it's much more difficult.
Yeah. So next, I think the metaverse is very much like the Oasis in Ready Player One. So if you remember Oasis, it has its own currency, its coin. People were known exclusively by their in-game avatar, like the look of the avatar and their name. It's always on. The only thing I don't think it will be is that it's the Oasis in Ready Player One. It was still controlled by one entity. In the end, even though the entity was good, hopefully that's not the case.
There's a kill switch in that game.
Exactly. You can turn on and off. So like that's not exactly what we think the metaverse will be. But yeah, it's a very good representation of what it would be. Whether the metaverse is full on VR, I don't think so. I think the metaverse can be what it is without the VR part.
One of the things I want to see with the metaverse is, because I'm sure you saw back early bull market where Jack Dorsey was saying that, because you can tell he's like old guard, jaded with Web 2. You can tell because the whole vision of the internet was you could facilitate these kind of what we're talking about now with Web 3, what is potentially possible with Web 3. So you can tell he's jaded towards that. But I also, when someone who is biased towards that, but you also have to take his information seriously, because he's been in the top part of tech in the Web 2. He's been very successful. So what I'm talking about is he said that Web 3 is going to basically turn into Web 2 eventually. Like some company's going to come in, figure out, like the Facebooks of the world, some version of that's going to happen. It's going to take away the things that we're describing now with the decentralized ownership, the digital property rights. And I'm curious to see how that's going to play out, because I can see his approach or what he's thinking is like, because think of OpenSea versus LooksRare or Rarible. Those platforms were created, but everyone uses OpenSea for the most part. So there's still going to be like these more successful apps, and depending on how they are built, and are they going to turn them, like, is OpenSea going to become a more decentralized version? Like, are they going to open source things that make it to where like they are no longer the owner of the sole product, those things? So there's still a way that a single entity can take a lot of the market share away from the decentralized organizations. And I'm curious to see, to the Jack Dorsey's point, is I could definitely see where he's coming from, that if it's not done correctly, that large entities can overtake the metaverse in the early stages. I do think, I'm more of an optimist, so I think that the blockchain technology is powerful enough to where it can it will eventually be not able to be taken over in that manner. But I could see the short to midterm where it could be an issue, where a company comes in and just tries to take over market share, or they promise one thing and they become something else completely.
Yeah, so this brought up like a couple of things in mind. So I remember watching a video and Gary Vee was interviewed on stage and they were saying how NFTs were decentralized. He was like, no, they're not. He was like very adamant. It's like, no, they're not. He says like the technology is decentralized, but people are not. And then the other point the other thought that came to mind is like I'm reading this book called Master Switch. Basically, they're saying that for any network, it will all things they tend to become centralized because people are going to want to control networks of value if they have value. So yeah, I mean, like Ethereum, it could be centralized. It depends on how it's going to depend on how it will be managed. So yeah, like right now, the stakers like Coinbase, Lido, they have a lot of power if they decide they wanted to do something malicious.
Yeah, and that I think that's one of the concerns is like we start off we're slowly moving decentralized to Ethereum, but is it going to wrap around? Like, is the ecosystem going to eventually wrap around where a few entities own all the valuable stuff? In the Web 2 world, Facebook, Instagram, which is part of Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, all these, they own all of the data, which is the valuable asset in Web 2. And it's going to be, for this foreseeable, data is the valuable asset. So if at some point there's something that comes along in Web 3 that captures all of our attention and we start giving too much of our data to this platform where they can eventually take over, basically become a data farm like Facebook and Twitter are essentially, that can impact, the decentralized part of it, where again, we're focused on a single point of failure, which would be that entity. Because I deal in the current way, we want to think of Web3 is like you own your own data. But with that said, I've sold my soul to Yankee Stadium to get in the gate faster. Like they've got my retina. It's like the OneClear or whatever thing. They make it incredibly difficult. Yeah, they make it incredibly difficult to get into Yankee Stadium. You can
Why?
They've got about 50 ways you can get in, but they only let you in 2 of the ways. So to bypass that, you can go through the OneClear thing and go through that. So I did that just to get a Yankee Stadium. So at some point, I can see, let's say Facebook 2, just as an example. Facebook 2 comes along. They're a single entity, but they're making it where people want to use the platform that it's on. They're centralized. Then they start requiring us to leak more data to them until they eventually have enough data toward we're now dependent upon this company that we thought we were going to be decentralized, or that we thought we'd have decentralized control of it. So it's kind of a ramble, and it probably didn't make much sense, but there is a concern for that.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, last point is that the metaverse really is, hopefully, it will be a better version of the current internet. And the way I thought about this is basically the internet started off as just text. And then it moved to images or static images. Then we have moving images, video, which is, I believe, where we currently are now. It's just a natural progression that some type of interactive video, right, will come next. And interactive video, typically, in my mind, I think that's video games where you're inside the video and you're participating in it, and so you're immersed. To me, it's just obvious that that's going to come next. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just curious when is the thing. Because I think at some point, it kind of goes back to that thing we're just talking about with the network, that you have a physical network. I think once you have that that replaces the search engine to some degree. But let's say you have a home-based physical place that you can branch out to Sandbox, Roblox, but you also would potentially be able to go to work that way. So you'd walk to the work side of it, and you'd have your meetings in person and those things. So yeah, that's kind of my thinking is, when is that going to be acceptable for someone to have a real world interaction with someone where it's acceptable? Because right now they've got the Facebook version of it. It's not the most, from what I've seen, is like it's kind of weird. Like the meetings that they're having.
You're basically talking about companies, in this case Facebook as well, using
avatars to have a meeting.
Yeah, avatars to have meetings, right?
I don't think our generation is going to be doing that. I think it's going to be
no.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to be fully comfortable with that. But I think at some point the younger generation is going to be the ones that facilitate that part of it. So it's probably like 10 years away, I would think, before the 9 to 13-year-olds are becoming 19 to 23, and those people will be more in tune to, one, the technology will be better, so it will be more seamless, and two, they grew up with avatars playing games and stuff and had to interact. So I don't think it's gonna be as big of a deal for them to make that jump. Where us, we played video games, but not at the social level directly through the game as what they're doing now. So I think that's going to be more of a generational thing, where we're going to probably miss that boat, except for a few people later, and like maybe later on we start jumping onto that board. But I think it's not going to be mainstream until that generation comes up.
It'll be like 60s, and then have a avatar that's like in the 20s.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other thoughts before we wrap up?
Nope. Nothing.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this sort of breakdown on how we thought about what the metaverse will be like, by giving you guys examples from what we already have. So yeah, we'll see you guys next week.